All right, so this is one of the first build videos I've ever done, so bear with me if it is scatterbrained and all over the place. We'll try to get to every single thing that we can as we go through it. So if you have chosen to play Sorcerer and you have watched me at all on stream go through and do what I've been doing, I have found a build that I'm sure probably other people have put out there that is based pretty much on Lash. A lot of people have done Lash builds. I'm sure mine is probably no different. But we're going to go through every piece of it just so everyone has an example of what I took, why I took it, and how it kind of plays together. So the build starts obviously with 5 ranks of Lash, enhanced Lash, and glinting. Glinting is there specifically because we want to try and reduce cooldowns for every single attack. And we're going to be Lashing basically constantly. So you're trying to cut your cooldowns down as much as you can because Sorcerer is built around all of the cooldowns being activated as often as possible. So this is a huge piece. Because of that, for the build in general, attack speed is going to be super, super, super important. The more Lashing we're doing, the more cooldown reduction we're getting. So attack speed and basic skill attack speed are huge stats for this build. Next, we take 1 rank of charge bolts, specifically because of destructive charge bolts. Reduces the damage taken or damage dealt by targets by 20% for 3 seconds. And while we are not casting charge bolts specifically ourselves, when we get to the bottom of the tree, and I'll just scroll down real quick, this is going to be a big piece of getting all of those skills out that you're not actually casting yourself, but Unstable Currents is casting for you. And so Unstable Currents, when it is up, you have a chance with every shock skill you cast, aka Lash, to get another shock skill to cast, and the hope is that charge bolts goes out and reduces the damage dealt by targets that are hit by it by 20%. Right here we take 1 rank of devastation, not for the mana itself, but to get to elemental dominance. Core skills deal 9% increased damage when cast above 50 mana, and you'll notice that all of our stuff basically does not reduce you below 50% mana or below 50 mana because we're just spamming Lash, which doesn't cost a thing anyway. So looking at the core skill damage bonus, we're looking at the charge bolts that go out. Getting a little bit of damage boost there goes a long way. This point is potentially, these are movable, and there's some variation in this if you want, because the core skills, you know, charge bolt not being a big piece of it, it's okay if you move these if you need survivability somewhere else. Next, we go down to the defensive skills, in which we will basically take everything. The entire idea behind this is throwing out every defensive skill that you can to stay alive. That's why we run teleport to get away from things, and as well as synergizing with the chest piece, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Flame shield as your get out of jail free card because it makes you immune for 2 seconds, 2.1 in this case, which is massive. Immunity will break CCs. It gets you out of one-hit abilities, things like that. This is super, super important. This is our I'm about to die, please save me button. And that's why we go up to Shimmering for the heal, just in case, as well as the movement speed to just run away from stuff, right? Teleport, enhance, obviously reducing the cooldown, and after teleport you gain damage reduction. This is for going into combat because this will synergize with the chest piece, the Raiment of the Infinite that we have, which adds an ability to teleport where when you blink in, everything gets pulled to you. And we are all about close damage, which is anything within melee range. So just sucking all the guys close in, don't take that out of context, is just a massive piece of this build. And the lucky hit chance on it is actually really high too, and we'll talk about why that is important a little bit. Next, I did take 1 from Elemental Attunement to try and get every critical strike within a lucky hit has critical strikes have up to a 5% chance to reset the cooldown, which can be pretty important. You're going to be attacking a lot. You're going to be hoping for lucky hits a lot, and if one of those does crit, you have a chance to get literally one of your cooldowns just reset instantly. Glass Cannon, it is at 7 out of 3 because of gear that I have on. We'll look at those too. Is just damage increase across the board. You're going to take more, but hopefully we're mitigating. Barrier generation from Ice Armor is a bread and butter piece of DPS output for Sorcerer in general, because a lot of your stuff, a lot of the aspects, legendary aspects we'll be running, play off of having a barrier up in general. And so even just one rank of ice armor, you don't need additional points down here. You're not looking for any of this stuff. We just want to have ice armor up basically as often as possible because it generates a barrier. And then Frost Nova at max rank to try and get it out as fast as possible, as often as possible, because Novaing makes things vulnerable, and vulnerability damage and the modifiers we have on gear based on whether or not the target is vulnerable is pretty massive. We're looking at killing enemies frozen, reduce the cooldown. You're going to be doing a lot of that because you're teleporting in, you're Frost Novaing instantly, and hoping to kill everything as fast as you can. And making enemies vulnerable 4 or 6 against bosses, that's a big piece. Next, we go down to conjuration skills, of which we are basically taking nothing of the main skills. We look for the lucky hit chance increased by 15%. I do like that a lot because you are trying to push lucky hits as often as you can. Once your lucky hit chance gets high enough, I think around 40-ish%, you can start to drop points off of this, and I probably need to do a little bit of tuning and shift those around depending on what else you want. Align the elements. The 1 in there is specifically to be able to get 2 on protection. Using a cooldown grants 20% of your max life as a barrier. This is big too, because if you don't have ice armor up, when you teleport in, it's going to give you a barrier. When you Frost Nova, it's going to give you a barrier. When you cast Unstable Currents, every cooldown you're running is going to give you barriers, and the barrier generation is big because of all the other skills and lucky hit chance play off of having a barrier up. Next, we go down to mastery skills, of which we are getting a bunch of bonus points from gear, and we'll talk about that. So pay no attention to 3 out of 5, 3 out of 5. But Meteor is taken. Once you get past a certain lucky hit chance, typically these builds you'll see Firebolt taken because of the enchantment effect. The direct damage from skills applies up to an additional amount of damage as burning for 8 seconds. And we do have some stuff that plays off of whether or not the target is burning, which is pretty big. But once you get enough lucky hit chance, you're hoping for the enchantment effect from Meteor to come into play, an 8% chance for Meteor to fall on enemies, because up here, Meteor immobilizes. And when you have stuns and immobilizes stacking from certain aspects, certain legendary aspects, those will be multiplicative in damage, and that will elevate the amount of damage output that you're putting, that your sorcerer is doing, simply because not only are you applying a burn with Meteor because it's fire, so you get those, but you're also adding an additional status effect, the crowd control effect, which is massive. The swap to Meteor, once you get lucky hit chance high enough, is big. 1 point in Inner Flames, specifically so that we can get 3 here, because Meteor is applying burning. It's also applying immobilization, which means the bonus from critical strike damage is 75% on targets that you're hitting with the Meteor when you're literally in the mix, already doing close damage, stacking everything up. So this goes absolutely nuts with Meteor in there. And then the other big piece of damage for us is Ball Lightning. Critical strikes on lucky hits have a chance, 25% chance to spawn a static Ball Lightning. This is the other enchantment effect that we take. So we're taking Meteor and Ball Lightning because Arc Lash lucky hits, if we go back up top, at 20% chance, plus the bonus that we get from our gear, mean we are constantly spawning Meteors and Ball Lightnings as fast as we can. You'll notice the modifier Ball Lightning's damage rate is increased by 200% of your attack speed, another reason to take attack speed. And then if an enemy is hit at least 4 times by a cast of Ball Lightning, which is pretty much any elite or boss, you get a free crackling energy. So you'll notice in gameplay videos, I'm basically pushing crackling energy the entire time. It's almost always full, so you're zapping people as you run around, doing even more lightning damage as you run. Next, we go down here, ultimate skills. We grab 1 point in Permafrost so that we can get 3 points in here. 18% increased damage to frozen enemies. We're constantly going to be Novaing, so that damage increase is big too. And then Unstable Currents is the end-all, be-all. I would like to cast spells and blow things up. This is your huge DPS push. This is like probably a 4x multiplier for the amount of damage output you're going to be doing, because we have Unstable Currents increase your attack speed. We love that. And then down here, while it's active, crackling energy continually pulses and consumes no charges. So you pull those 12 crackling energies in, you pop Unstable Currents if there's like an elite, something like that around, or it's about to be a boss fight. and you just blow as much damage as you possibly can all at the same time. And then last but not least, our keystone down here at the bottom. Crackling energy hits additional enemies. Each time it hits, your shock cooldowns are reduced, up, which is insane. You get bonus against elites as well. So we're looking at trying to push cooldowns to get Nova and Ice Armor, Teleport, and Unstable Currents up basically the entire time. That's the skill tree that we're running currently, and some of the pieces of gear play off of that in a huge way. The synergy in this build with the stuff that you have on is massive. I did just make one change a little bit ago, so I'm gonna have to update the build link, which will be in the description down below the video. You can check that the whole time if you want to. But fortune is big. Your lucky hit chance is increased by 20% while you have barrier, and I talked about we have barrier up as often as we can. You're also looking for cooldown reduction and basic skill attack speed on your helmet. Those are probably the most important stats in general for this build. I mean, as sorceress in general, you want cooldown reduction, and because we're spamming basic skill the entire time, the attack speed increases big. Next, Raiment of the Infinite is a best in slot, almost necessary for this build to work the way that you want to, because after using teleport, close enemies are pulled to you and stunned for 2.9 seconds. The cooldown increase, not a big deal because we're mitigating the cooldown increase with all the reduction stuff that we have, but being able to teleport in and have everything come to you and then arc lash and cause AoEs, the meteors, the lightning balls, ball lightning to spawn like crazy, huge. Luckily unique, you don't have to worry about re-rolling a stat, no big deal because you can't. Next, rapid, basic skills gain attack speed, we love that. We love attack speed on it, lightning critical strike damage, crit strike chance, and lucky hit. This might be one of the best rolled items that I have because it has so many good stats on it. But again, you're looking at attack speed as like your #1 thing. Next, we need a defensive piece. I just got this one today, which is nuts. Dodge chance against close enemies, damage reduction from close enemies, meteor ranks, and ball lightning. Everything in here we're using constantly, plus a perfect roll disobedience aspect. And disobedience for a sorcerer is big because you're looking at the armor increase just across the board is massive. You're going to be in the mix the entire time, so that damage mitigation goes nuts. Next, Asu's Heirloom, extremely good. Critical strike chance based on your movement speed is big, and you're basically constantly getting that both from this item itself. You'll see Evade grants 75% movement speed for 1 second. You'll notice in gameplay, I'm constantly using my Evade because that means I'm getting additional crit chance, which is big. Plus, you're getting movement speed for 4 seconds after you kill an elite, and all of these things synergize with the unique aspect on these boots. Next, I just rerolled this weapon this morning, kind of looking at 2 setups right now, but basic skill damage, damage to close enemies, damage to crowd control, which we're doing constantly, and vulnerable. We're trying to keep them frozen as much as we can. And then the aspect for Storm Swell is vulnerability damage when you have a barrier, which you should have basically all the time. And then I'm running emeralds in those because the critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. It's all synergy working off of each other, right? Neck control is one of the best aspects in the game because you're doing additional damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen. And those 3 things will stack on top of each other. That's why Meteor is big, because not only are you freezing with your Nova, but you're immobilizing with the Meteor. And if you're running Arc Lash and things like that, you have a chance to stun enemies based on how you set up your build. So you're looking at kind of using all of these things together. And then this also comes with all mastery skills, all 3 ranks to Glass Cannon, which is big, all Conjuration, which we're doing as well, and then cooldown reduction. Just the stats on this neck are nuts. Next, my rings could use a little bit of work. I will admit that because some of the stats are not perfect, but we're looking at the aspects in these, and in this case, Conceited Ring, deal 24% increased damage while you have a barrier. Have that running the entire time. Crit strikes with core skills increase your attack speed, and accelerating one of the lower tier ones, in my opinion, because you're not doing... The only core skill we're casting is when Unstable Currents is up, and we're only getting charge bolts from Unstable Currents. So this only comes into play if you're getting a crit from an Unstable Current cast of charge bolts. It is less important to have this one, but still does kind of play off of each other. And everything else in there is great. I might roll away damage to injured enemies if I had the opportunity to. This, of course, I already re-rolled for crit strike, and it's actually a really low roll, so I need to fix that. And then last but not least, a cooldown reduction, basic skill damage, attack speed, crit chance offhand here with Elementalist supplied because core or mastery skills cast at or above 100 mana, which we're basically not using mana, gain increased crit strike chance. So that goes absolutely nuts, and everything on there should make a lot of sense. That's the entire build. The last piece, and this is going to be level dependent, I do have another glyph socket to unlock, is Paragon boards. A lot of people I see right now, and in fact, one of our friends in the group kind of didn't understand exactly what was going on here. So Paragon boards are, once you hit 50, you start getting these points, and it looks kind of like a maze that you're building. What you want to do, the goal for Paragon with this build is not necessarily to focus on the legendary nodes, but to get to the glyph sockets as fast as you can. These pieces are the glyph sockets for this. I'm still kind of in the mix of building these out, but a couple of the ones that I've chosen I feel like are some of the best that you can run. I love anything vulnerability, and dealing damage to vulnerable enemies in general gives you just a 10% damage increase, plus you're getting more vulnerable damage on the target. So that glyph is obviously a big piece of it. Again, if this is too fast, you can look at the link in the description down below if you want the build. All of this stuff is in there. That's going to be important. If this is too fast, you miss anything on here, you can pause, whatever. I like territorial because you're doing more damage to close enemies. Plus, within this radius, there's quite a bit of dex. And because this plays off of dexterity, we're up to 51.2% damage increase to close, which is a lot. Plus, you get damage reduction if you've met the 25 dex requirement. Next one we're running is control. Crowd control enemies. We're doing all sorts of crowd control, so that's big. And then increased damage to stunned or frozen in this case, 20% there is very, very big. This scales really fast with the 5 dex. So once I get the range for this one, I think this is the one I'm working on next. 7 dex. These are just outside of the current range. Once you get to 15, it'll bump up. And that's going to make this just go even more insane, which is going to be huge. Next glyph I have in here is Adept. We're looking at mastery skills, especially the increased area is big because when Meteor drops, it has to be within the zone to get Immobilize. And if that zone is 20% larger, you get more Immobilize. That also means Ball Lightning hits a larger area too, and just the mastery skill damage increase in general is big. And last but not least is I need to figure out what I'm going to put in here. I'm pretty sure, based on what I've looked at earlier and the fact that we're doling out increased damage to burn enemies, will probably be Flame Feeder. More dex isn't necessarily a bad thing because some of the other pieces, like chilling, they go off your rare nodes go off of dexterity. We're getting real close on additional 4% damage reduction for enemies that are burning. A lot of that stuff for Sorcerer plays off of dex on those rare nodes. So putting another dex-based glyph socket, not a huge deal. So that's where we are currently for Paragon. And that is the build in general. If there are some of the stuff, there's room for adjustment across the board. Everything in it you can modify subtly, like I pointed out. If you're lucky a chance is too high, you can move precision magic away. If you're not worried about core skill damage, because you're only really getting it from charge bolts and not anything else, then you can move those points. This actually might be one I move before too long. So there's a little bit of breathing room. But in general, the build works almost entirely off of attack speed and cooldown reduction, hoping that you get lucky hits to spawn ball lightnings, meteors, the status effects from those, and when you freeze, they just go nuts. Actual skill usage is you're basically spamming ice armor as often as you can. You're teleporting into a group, you're novaing immediately, and holding down shift and left click to spam arc lash to get lucky hits as often as you can. And then anytime there's a large group or elites or a boss, Unstable Currents comes in, and then you use Flame Shield as your get out of jail free card in case you get frozen, crowd controlled, anything like that. And once you have Disobedience on the pants, combined with all the barrier you're generating in Flame Shield, this would probably work in hardcore pretty well. Don't push tiers too fast. Don't push Nightmare dungeons too high. but I don't see why you could not make this build work both in soft and hardcore. So, and do me a favor, hit the like button, and I appreciate you watching the video. Use code DrLupo. Use code DrLupo.